After e4, e5, knight c3, knight f6, f4, d5. So black is playing the main moves against the Vienna. Okay, d5. And now we're looking at the move e4. We've seen it before, so we're gonna keep going. We've got a few things to still look at. Bishop to b5 comes now with check, and now c6. So now, as mentioned in one of the previous videos, we have to take, and after take back, we have to go back to c4. We have achieved an isolated pawn on the c6 square. And after bishop to c5, we go on with d3. So in the previous video, we stopped around here, and this is the moment that we have to see something unseen, because here we get a material advantage. What happens if black takes the pawn? Okay, take back. And after castling, develop the bishop to d2. And now let's look at two options, then we're going to go on to the main topics of the video. So if black, let's say, gives us a chance to swap, let's say bishop to g4, okay, here you just swap. Obviously, so that the rook doesn't come to e8. Not that it would be a problem, but still. Okay, now you just attack the bishop, and the bishop is basically cannot go to h5 because it gets trapped, so bishop f5. You notice how after long castling, the black player has just wasted a few tempos, and he's down a pawn. It's also worse structure. Let's consolidate here by playing, okay, let's say knight d7, knight f3. Knight b6 attacking the bishop, bishop to b3. And after the knight centralizes, knight to e5. Let's close the line here. This is a completely winning endgame, as you can tell. So in this position, what happens if rook goes to e8 check instead of bishop to g4? Okay, knight g to e2. And now, obviously, if black plays something like bishop to g4, obviously you take. So you understand the ideas. It's not about memorizing moves. So queen to e7, developing, piling up on the pinned piece, although it's very well defended, so we never have to worry. h3, this is very important. You want to stop bishop g4 here. There's too much attack otherwise. Knight d7, we're already winning here. Not too much, actually. The advantage is not too much. Long castle, knight to b6 attacking the bishop, and here you play knight to d4. Our opponent is about to remove one of the defender of this knight, and we don't want to get crushed. So knight to d4 here, we give up the bishop pair, it doesn't matter. Takes. And after a5, the idea of playing bishop to a6. Okay. So white now plays rook h to e1, and after queen to d6, only move to still defend the bishop. Swap rooks. And now knight to e4, double attack on the bishop. We should be winning a piece, unless black takes this one. But still, what you do now is you take the bishop, and now you're simplifying and you're winning this endgame. If queen takes knight, rook e1 wins for white. Right, so we saw that line. We'll look at another one that we haven't seen yet, and this is the main topic of this video. So knight f4, main move, f4, d5, take, and now e4. This is the move of the black player. Obviously, this is a strong pawn, supposed to be a strong pawn, but it's not enough. Bishop b5 check immediately. And after c6, pawn takes, and now knight takes back. We haven't looked at this at all. Okay, now white plays the crucial d4. We don't care that this is now a passed pawn because it's a weak pawn. Well, I mean, later on you might think it can be protected, but they're not going anywhere. And now black has a chance of taking ampersand. Of course, this is not convenient because that just gives black something very similar to the earlier scenario where basically take ampersand and now queen d3 gives us the chance to simplify. Queen e7 here will block the bishop, and you can just keep developing. Queen takes, bishop takes. There's absolutely nothing achieved. Let's say bishop develops to d6, bishop to d2, castle. a3 comes now, rook to a8 check. Knight develops in e2. So very similar patterns. A move like knight to d4 now start to put pressure on e2. You just castle alongside, you never have to worry again. A move like bishop to g4 also, just long castle. And anytime there's an attack on this knight, long castle. After a6, for instance, avoiding knight to b5. Okay, long castle again. And after b5, coming down with an attack on these pawns. Remember, there's no queens on the board, so you don't have to worry. Bishop to e1 happens. And here there's absolutely nothing. A move like b4, you just take. Take, attack on the bishop. But now bishop to h7 and you just take the rook. So those are tactics that appear, obviously, due to the weird position of our opponent's pieces. If instead black plays something like rook to b8 here. Okay, well, here you can take this, right? So that's just an example. Now the bishop can... Now you may say that black can win a pawn as well. Now take back. And when we lose our bishop, bishop to h4, attacking the knight, threatening to smash the pawn structure. So after knight e4, rook h2 e1, pinning it. These are just sample moves. Of course, it's not like they're going to happen on anything. But you see how to move, how to exploit the patterns, and which ones are the strengths and weaknesses. Now let's say a developing move like bishop to g4. You just take the knight. And when the bishop takes your rook, you take back with the king, and this is better for black. If instead black here plays f5, protecting that knight. Okay, b3, give space to the king, and after bishop to a6, there's really nowhere else that you could have placed that bishop. Okay, take, rook to d6, bishop to b7, protecting the knight, knight e5. And we've gone way past any theory or anything, but I just wanted to make sure that we could win this game. Rook to e8 here, protecting the passed pawn. Just played knight e3. Position evaluated +3 for a very long time. So let's just change line. Actually, let's go from the beginning. So knight f6, f4, d5, take, and now e4. Okay, bishop check, c6, take, knight takes. Our opponent has sacrificed the pawn for development, and we played d4. So there are plenty of moves we're going to go through. I think we're done with this type of idea with pawn to d3, helping us develop. So let's see how to take this. Let's say a6. So this is important. The reason why you watch this video is so that you can always know what to do. For example, a6, right? If you don't remember the move now, and you shouldn't try to remember, what are you going to do now? Okay, bishop takes, obviously. Pawn takes back. Try to rebuild structures that you have already seen before and go to a favorable endgame. Knight g2, e2 happens now, obviously. Bishop e7 developing. Castle, castle. And now h3. Stop the bishop from going to g4. That's always a good idea. And now let's look at two options. So let's say, for instance, something like c5. That's bad. You can say that, obviously it's threatening to take this pawn, reunite with the pawn structure. Of course, you can take back. But at least the black player will be getting rid of the isolated weak pawn for one of our central pawns. So here you play bishop to e3. You're developing. And after take back. Okay, develop. Bishop b7. Queen to e1. Queen to a5, rook to d1. See, normal development move. A move like queen to h5 here is actually not good, because knight g3 simply, you attack the queen has to move, and now knight to f5 should win the game because you have a Zwischenzug. So here, instead of queen h5, let's look at rook to d8. Okay, now you can recapture this pawn, because there's an attack on the queen. So queen takes, instead you do this. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook f takes. And we have enough defense over the square d4. If bishop to h4 attacking a rook, g3, nothing to worry. Bishop e7, we're completely winning this endgame, as you can tell. It's not very, very easy, but still. And in this position, earlier we went through the idea of c5. What happens after rook to e8? Normal moves. Okay, knight to a4. How do we exploit this weak structure? Okay, rook to b8, for instance. c4. I would love to put the pawn in c5 and the bishop and the knight here in b6. And if black plays c5, then you just take. Don't worry about the pawn structure being broken, because then you have, I mean, it's not really broken. Like these pawns here, once you play a3 b4, these pawns are actually super good. So that's actually super favorable for us. So in this position, after the knight just takes back in c6, okay, d4. We saw what's the idea after a6. You smash the pawn structure, taking en passant. It gives the scenario that we've seen before. It's just helping us. Okay, so let's look at bishop to g4. What happens now? Knight g to e2. Obviously, you couldn't play knight f3. So after bishop to b4, pinning a knight, castle. This is important. And after castle, now let's take the knight. The knight is no longer pinned. Pawn takes back. You see, starting to recognize the patterns. h3. The bishop will have to go back. Obviously not h5 because he gets trapped. Let's look at this move. Bishop to e6. You just attack the bishop. This is actually just fine for white because you can just start pushing pawns. And any swap is favorable for white because we're winning. Bishop a5. b3 comes now. Queen to d7 developing. King to h2. This is important because this sacrifice would have been a bit annoying. If the knight goes to d5, for instance, this is a completely free pawn. There's no compensation. If, let's say, rook f to d8, to make an example, piling up pressure on d4, knight to a4 comes. Knight to c5 will be a perfect square to go to. So after bishop to b6, queen to e1. And now it looks like we're giving a pawn. Bishop to d4, but this is not a problem. Take. Bishop to b2. This is an excellent move. Queen to d6, moving away, but now you can take, smashing the pawn structure, and then queen taking in e4 gives a better endgame for white. Nothing to worry here. Bishop to d5. Just to make an example, queen to f5, you're completely winning. So in this position, after h3, what if the bishop just takes our knight? This simplification, how does it work? Okay, knight takes back, and that's it. It's just making it easy. Let's look at c5, just to make an example. Then we're going to look at another example. c5. Here, it's good to push pawns. a3, bishop moves back. You can take this pawn with absolutely no compensation. If queen goes away from the swap, then b4. That's it. And if instead of c5, black plays bishop to d6, just going backward, right? You see how desperate now the situation is. c4. Okay, let's see how to consolidate the advantage. Rook to v8, queen moves to c2, rook e8, bishop develops. Let's look at this move, how to deal with this. Knight to h5, typical move to be annoying in g3. Rook a to d1, you ignore it. There's nothing. Queen to h4, c5, you just carry on because black has nothing, doesn't have enough development, enough pieces to create a threat. Bishop to c7, d5, we're going to create a passed pawn. Takes. And after knight to g3, how do we react? Okay, we just take. Queen takes back. And now queen f2, desperate for swap. And I think we're going to achieve it. Besides, look at these three pawns. Take, whatever. So in this position, after the knight just takes in c6, we play d4, right? And we're just going to look through something like bishop to d7. It's an idea that we haven't seen this type of move. The idea is basically to develop the bishop and not to let us break this pawn structure with the isolated c6 pawn. Before we do that, I'm just going to mention that bishop b4 is going to be ignored because the best move now is knight g to e2, and it's a transposition. You know, you castle, you play the normal moves, bishop d2 and queen e1, blah blah blah. We've seen it before. It's not a different scenario. This is the scenario that needs to be seen, bishop d7, because we haven't explored this type of move. Now here, obviously, you go on with knight e2. The good thing about knight e2, remember, is also putting defense over f4, extra defense. Anyway, a6. Okay, bishop c4. Obviously, this swap is now not favorable at all. So bishop to c4, and after bishop to e7, a3. Castle. Let's look at this now. b5, a3. By the way, obviously you know that the reason is that in case black plays knight a5 idea, you can go to a2 and the bishop remains super good in this diagonal. b5, bishop to a2, queen to b6 developing. f5 is the best move. When the black queen goes away from this diagonal, f5 might be an idea, because you have idea of bishop g5 and it puts pressure over these pawns, over the king side. A move like b4 now is met with knight to d5. Obviously take is favorable. I mean, if the queen moves away after, I don't know, taking the bishop for instance, and then playing bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the, maybe to the other knight or to the queen, but you're just doing absolutely fine. Well, you're basically completely winning. So after, let's say, take back, with this pressure on e4. So that's one of the tactics you need to remember. Pawn takes is met by pawn takes, no problems at all. It's completely fine for you. You're gonna play c4, c5 at some point. If black plays a5 to defend the pawn instead, go on with c3. You're gonna challenge this annoying b4 pawn. Let's say now black plays b3 instead of like swapping, because every swapping is favorable for us. Knight to g3, finalizing the attack over e4. Another thing that had to be mentioned, by the way, that I completely forgot, is after these moves and d5 main line, take, and now e4, bishop b5 check. Something we haven't gone through at all is knight b to d7 to block that, and this, you might argue, kind of allows the black player to keep the pawn structure here completely safe. However, this is passive. White now goes on with d3 and takes the center. We got 3 pawns in the center. Basically, we're aiming at taking. Let's say if our opponent takes us, this is just helping us develop, and we've seen this scenario already in previous videos. Bishop to d6, now developing bishop to d2, castle, and now surprisingly we take the knight. Knight takes back, I mean bishop takes back, castle, long. White keeps the material advantage. c6, now how to deal with this? Take. This is a bit surprising because now the bishop takes back. However, knight to f3. So we don't care that our opponent is well developed, he's got bishop pair, because our pawn there has been taken with no compensation. 2 ideas we're gonna look at now. Let's say bishop to b4, for instance. That's not a problem. Queen c4 attacking the bishop. And after bishop takes in f3, you take back with the pawn. It breaks the pawn structure, but that's fine. Okay, a5 defending the bishop, a3 attacking it. Now we're asking a question. What do you want to do? Rook to c8 attacking the queen? Not a problem. Queen to b3. Now the bishop has to go. We're going to take in b7. Bishop takes. Bishop takes. There's nothing here. Attack on the queen, so queen piling up with the rook on the king. There's no problem at all. Bishop to e5, attacking the queen. If the queen moves, let's say, to e7, you go bishop d6. If the queen goes to c6, you got the rook to d6. If not, you were just going to take the knight. And in this position, if instead of the idea of bishop b4, obviously our opponent wants to keep the bishop pair, so let's play a5, right, to start attacking on the queen side. Rook h2 e1, a4. There's no problem at all. We play knight to d4 now, and after a3, b3. We're giving this annoying pawn, but that's not a problem. Bishop to d7 now, saving the bishop pair. Knight d2 b5, attacking the bishop again. Bishop to e7, knight to d5, and obviously we're happy to swap. Knight takes, so it's the best move by white. Queen takes, and after rook to c8, it looks like black pieces are well placed. Maybe these 2 bishops not that much, but at least he has the bishop pair. And besides the threat of rook c5 now, so c4 is the best move. And after rook to c5, just go back to e4, attacking the bishop. Bishop takes. The move now is bishop to b4. When the bishop moves away, you can take the rook. If not, I mean, you got an attack on e7, so completely winning. And in this position, after the knight goes to d7, we said we play d3. What happens if black doesn't trade and just develops and plays bishop c5? How do we respond to this? Now, obviously, here we have a chance to take, and this is completely fine. Castle. This might look a bit dangerous, especially after rook e8, but just play queen f3 now. Don't have to worry about the pawn in e4. Rook to e8. You're well protected. Knight e2. a6 attacking the bishop. Bishop to d3. Knight to b6 now. because where else can you put the knight? White just plays h3. There is absolutely no compensation for the center that our opponent has given us. Besides, we got a majority on the king side. We're gonna push all the pawns. Position already evaluated as if white was more than up a piece.